The alarm on the 14th floor went off at 2:19 in the morning, and by 2:23, trained professionals were already on the ground. The man standing over them was breathing hard, knuckles split, moving toward the elevator bank like he owned the building. Behind him, forgotten in the hallway, sat a yellow cleaning cart with a mop handle still swaying from where someone had brushed past it in a hurry. Nobody was behind that cart anymore. Marcus Webb had stepped out from behind it 30 seconds earlier, and he had not said a word. If you have ever been the person everyone in the room looked past, the guy in the uniform nobody bothered to learn the name of, stay with this one until the end. Because what happened next on that 14th floor is the reason his name is on a security badge today instead of a name tag that just says Building Services. 10 hours earlier, Marcus Webb had been standing in his kitchen at 5:30 in the morning, pouring cereal into a bowl for his daughter Ellie, who was 8 years old and already dressed for school in a cardigan 2 sizes too big because she liked the sleeves long. He worked nights. He'd worked nights for 6 years, ever since his wife passed, because nights were the only shift that let him be home in the morning to make breakfast, walk Ellie to school, and be there again in the afternoon when the bus dropped her off. He slept in the gap in between 4 or 5 hours, if he was lucky, on a couch that had seen better decades. He did not complain about it. He had never once complained about it. Not to his daughter, not to his neighbors, not to the men who ran the office tower where he emptied trash cans and buffed marble floors 5 nights a week. Marcus had a routine, and the routine did not change. He arrived at the Halbrook Tower at 11 p.m. sharp, badge in, card out, floors 9 through 20 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He worked alone, mostly alongside a rotating handful of other night staff, though the man he trusted most was an older janitor named Desmond Price, who had worked the building for 11 years and who Marcus considered as close to a friend as the job allowed. Desmond used to say that the building had 2 versions of itself. The daytime version, full of noise and phone calls and people who walked like they were late for something important. And the nighttime version, quiet and empty, where you could hear the air conditioning breathing through the vents and see the whole skeleton of the place laid bare. Once the people left, Marcus preferred the nighttime version. He preferred quiet. It was, in a way, the only thing that still felt like his own. Nobody at Halbrook Tower knew that Marcus Webb had spent 8 years in the Marine Corps, 4 of them as a hand-to-hand combat instructor, teaching close-quarters defense to men who would go on to work protective details for senators, executives, and eventually corporate security firms. Nobody knew, because nobody had ever asked. That was the thing about the tower. It ran on a strict hierarchy. And hierarchies do not usually bother to look downward. Marcus wore gray. The executives on the top 3 floors wore charcoal suits that cost more than his monthly rent. Between them sat men in black tactical polos with earpieces curling behind their ears. Men who called themselves the protective detail for Harrison Cole, the founder and CEO of Colebrook Dynamics, a logistics and defense contracting firm that occupied the top 11 floors of the tower. The head of that protective detail was a man named Trent Ashford. Ashford had been hired 18 months earlier by the company's chief operating officer, a sharp-suited man named Dale Weaver, who had built his entire reputation inside Colebrook Dynamics on the idea that he could run security cheaper and leaner than anyone else in the industry, while still telling the board that Harrison Cole was safer than ever. Weaver liked numbers that looked good on paper. He liked contracts that came in under budget. He liked telling people that he had personally vetted the team, protecting the company's founder. A team he'd assembled through a private contracting firm that gave him a kickback on every placement. What Weaver did not like was being questioned about anything by anyone, which was, as it happened, exactly what was about to occur. 3 weeks before the night the alarm went off, Marcus had been buffing the floor outside the 14th floor conference room around midnight when he noticed something that most people would have walked straight past. A door? The service door that led to the stairwell behind the executive floor. The one meant to be secured with a keycard lock at all times, after hours. It was propped open with a folded piece of cardboard, just enough to keep the latch from catching. Marcus stopped his cart. He crouched down and looked at it the way a man looks at a puzzle piece that does not belong to the puzzle. It was a small thing, the kind of small thing most people would kick the cardboard free and think nothing more. Of Marcus did not think nothing more of it. He'd spent 8 years training men to think in terms of access points, blind spots, response times. A prop door on an unmonitored stairwell, feeding directly into the corridor outside the CEO's office suite, was not a small thing. It was a hole in a perimeter. And perimeters, in his experience, did not fail by accident nearly as often as people like to believe. He reported it. That was the extent of what he was supposed to do, and the extent of what he did. He found the night shift supervisor, a tired, decent man named Ruiz, and told him the service door on 14 had been propped for at least a week, based on the wear pattern on the cardboard. Ruiz logged it, said he'd pass it up the chain, and that was that. Except it wasn't, because 2 days later, Marcus saw Ashford himself walk past that same door on his way to the elevator, and glance at the cardboard wedge without so much as breaking stride. Marcus watched him do it. He didn't say anything. Not that night. It wasn't his place to interrupt a man 3 pay grades above him on a shift he wasn't assigned to, but he filed it away, the same way he'd been trained to file away every small inconsistency, because inconsistencies were rarely alone. They traveled in packs. The following week, Marcus brought it up again, this time in person, because Ruiz told him the door had been handled, and it hadn't been. It was propped again. Same cardboard, same corner folded soft, from repeated use. He found Ashford in the lobby before the start of the day shift changeover. Door on 14's propped again, Marcus said. Same as before. Ashford looked at him the way a man looks at a vending machine that has eaten his dollar. Mild irritation, quickly replaced by dismissal. That's not your floor, Ashford said. It's not anyone's floor if nobody's watching it. You clean toilets, buddy. I run protection for a 9-figure executive. Let me worry about my perimeter. Marcus didn't argue. He never argued. He simply said, someone's using that door as a shortcut. Might be one of your own guys. Might not be. Either way, it's not locked when it should be. Ashford's jaw flexed. Noted, he said, in the tone of a man who had already forgotten the sentence before it left his mouth. Marcus went back to his cart. He did not know it yet, but that door and Ashford's refusal to take it seriously would very nearly get 3 men hospitalized and would come within 1 hallway of reaching the 14th floor's most important office. Word about the propped door reached Dale Weaver by way of a monthly incident log that Ruiz was required to file, a log that Weaver almost never read personally, because reading incident logs was, in his mind, the sort of thing junior staff did so that senior staff didn't have to. But this month, an assistant flagged it, because it had been logged 3 separate times. Weaver called Ashford into his office, not to fix the door, to manage the paper trail. 3 write-ups, Weaver said, sliding the printed log across his desk. From the same janitor. He doesn't know what he's talking about, Ashford said. Guy pushes a mop. He's not trained in security assessment. I don't care whether he's trained. I care that if this ever gets in front of Cole or the board, it looks like we've got an access control problem on a floor we personally certified as secure 6 months ago. Weaver tapped the paper. Make it go away. I'll get the door fixed. I don't care about the door. I care about the log. Get Ruiz to reclassify these as maintenance requests instead of security incidents. And tell your janitor friend to stick to his lane. Ashford nodded, because nodding was what you did when Dale Weaver told you to do something, and because the version of the story that made Ashford look competent was always going to be more appealing to Ashford than the version that made him look careless. The reclassification happened within 48 hours. 3 security incidents became 3 maintenance tickets. The doors stayed propped because nobody had actually fixed anything. They had simply fixed the record of it. Marcus noticed the reclassification because he checked, a week later out of the same quiet diligence that made him check everything twice. He mentioned it to Desmond Price one night over coffee in the break room on the 3rd floor, the only room in the building where night staff were allowed to sit down. They changed my report, Marcus said. Said it's a maintenance issue now, Desmond, who was 61 years old and had outlasted 4 different heads of security in his time at Halbrook Tower, shook his head slowly. That's how it goes here, Desmond said. They don't fix the hole, they just repaint the sign next to it. Somebody's going to walk through that hole eventually. Somebody usually does. Marcus didn't push it further, not because he didn't care, but because he understood the shape of the wall he was up against. He had made his report. He had made it twice. The people whose job it was to act on it had chosen instead to make it disappear administratively, which was, in its own way, worse than ignoring it. Ignoring it left the possibility that someone might still notice. Reclassifying it buried the noticing itself. He kept working. He kept his eyes on the door, whenever his route took him near it. And on the nights, his route didn't take him near it. He found reasons to walk that way anyhow. It was, in the end, exactly the kind of quiet, unpaid vigilance that no line item in Colebrook Dynamics' security budget accounted for. And it was the only reason anyone survived what happened 3 weeks later. The man who came through the prop door that night called himself nothing because he never gave his name to anyone, not the police, not the press, not even in the hours of interrogation that followed. What was known about him came later, through investigation. A former private security contractor named Alan Voss, terminated 8 months earlier from a Colebrook Dynamics subcontract after a dispute over unpaid severance, a dispute that had metastasized in his mind into a grievance against Harrison Kolb personally. He had spent 2 months studying the building. He knew the guard rotations. He knew the camera, blind spots. And he knew, because he still had a friend on the inside who owed him a favor, that there was a service store on the 14th floor that never quite latched all the way, propped by cardboard, unmonitored after 11 p.m. He came in through the loading dock at 1:58 in the morning, wearing a maintenance vest he bought online, and by 2:10 he was on the 14th floor stairwell, moving toward the executive corridor. The first bodyguard he encountered was a man named Reyes, posted at the elevator bank as a matter of routine, half paying attention to his phone. Voss did not give him the chance to reach for his radio. It was over in 4 seconds, a strike to the throat that put Reyes on the ground, choking, and Voss moved past him without breaking stride. The second was a man named Petrov, who heard the commotion and came around the corner with his hand already on his sidearm, which did him no good at all, because Voss closed the distance before the weapon ever cleared the holster. Petrov went down hard against the marble and did not get back up. The third was Ashford himself, who had been dozing in a chair outside Cole's private office, the same chair he'd been dozing in for the better part of 18 months, confident that a door 3 floors down that he had personally dismissed as a janitor's overreaction would never actually be a door anyone walked through. Ashford got one good punch in. It didn't matter. Voss put him on the floor with a knee to the ribs and a follow-up strike that left him gasping. And then Voss stood there in the hallway, breathing hard, 3 trained men on the ground around him, one door between him and Harrison Cole. That was when Marcus Webb came around the corner with his cart. He had been on 14, because he had told himself every night for 3 weeks that he would keep walking past that door until somebody actually fixed it. He heard the noise before he saw anything, a controlled, ugly sound of impact that he recognized instantly, because he had spent 8 years of his life around exactly that sound. He left the cart where it was and moved forward, low and quiet. The way he had trained hundreds of men to move. Voss saw him and laughed, the short, contemptuous laugh of a man who had just put down 3 professionals and did not consider a janitor with a mop bucket to be an obstacle worth respecting. "Go back to your cart," Voss said. Marcus didn't answer him. He didn't need to. Voss came at him the way he'd come at the others, fast, aiming to close distance and end it quickly. Marcus didn't retreat. He stepped in, not back, which was the last thing Voss expected, and caught the incoming arm at the wrist and the elbow in the same motion, turning his own hips into the movement so that Voss's momentum became the thing that put him on the ground, not Marcus's strength. It happened in under 2 seconds. Voss hit the marble on his stomach, and Marcus was already down with him, a single arm locked out straight and pinned at an angle that made any further movement a very bad decision for Voss's shoulder. "Don't," Marcus said. His voice was flat. Not raised, not urgent, just flat, the voice of a man stating a fact rather than issuing a threat. "You'll dislocate it." Voss tried anyway once and screamed, and did not try again. Marcus held the position and looked up at Ashford, who was on his hands and knees against the wall, blood on his lip, staring at the janitor pinning the intruder who had just put him on the ground in under 4 seconds. "Call it in," Marcus said. Ashford, for the first time in 18 months, did exactly what he was told without questioning it. The police arrived 9 minutes later. Marcus held the arm lock the entire time, shifting his weight only slightly when Voss tried once more to twist free, which earned him a second scream and a second stillness. When the responding officers came through the stairwell, weapons raised, they found a man in gray janitor's coveralls kneeling calmly over a subdued intruder, while 3 members of an executive protective detail sat against the wall in various states of injury, none of them having said a single useful thing yet. "He came out of nowhere," Reyes told the officers, still holding his throat. "Guy with the cart just dropped him." Harrison Cole did not come out of his office suite until the police confirmed the building was secure, which was, in itself, protocol working correctly for possibly the first time that night. When he did come out, he found his hallway full of paramedics, 3 of his highest-paid protective specialists being treated for injuries, and a man in a gray uniform sitting on an overturned supply bucket, giving a calm, detailed statement to a police sergeant. The kind of statement that used phrases like single point of entry and response window and compromise perimeter, phrases that Harrison Cole recognized because he had heard men who ran actual security details use those same phrases in briefings. He did not recognize them. Coming from a janitor, he said nothing that night. He watched, he listened. And when Marcus finally stood up, brushed off his knees and reached for his cart like nothing unusual had happened, Cole watched that too. The security footage was reviewed the next morning in a conference room on the 16th floor by Harrison Cole personally, along with the building's head of physical security and, uncomfortably, Dale Weaver, who had been called in specifically because it was his department, his contracted personnel, and his signature on the report that had reclassified 3 prior warnings about that exact door as routine maintenance. The footage was clear. It showed Voss taking down Reyes in 4 seconds. It showed him taking down Petrov in 6. It showed him putting Ashford on the ground with contemptuous ease. And then it showed a man in a gray uniform stepping calmly out from behind a cleaning cart and ending the entire confrontation in under 2 seconds, without a weapon, without raising his voice, without so much as changing his breathing pattern in any way visible on the recording. Cole watched it 4 times. "Who is that?" he asked on the 3rd replay, though he had asked the same question after the first. "Building janitorial staff," the security director said. "Name's Marcus Webb. Night shift, 9 years with the contracting company that services this building. Pull his personnel file. It took less than an hour. What came back was not what anyone in that room expected. 8 years in the United States Marine Corps. 4 of those years spent as a certified close-quarters combat instructor at a training facility that, as it happened, was the same facility that had certified the private contracting firm Ashford's entire team had come through. Marcus Webb had, in fact, personally trained 2 of the instructors who had gone on to design the very curriculum that certified Reyes and Petrov. Cole sat back in his chair and read that detail twice. The way a man rereads a sentence he suspects he misunderstood the first time because it changes the entire shape of the room if he understood it correctly. He had on his own payroll, cleaning his own floors at night, for less than a 40th of what he paid his head of protective detail, the man who had trained the trainers of the team that had just been put on the ground in 11 seconds combined. "Where's Ashford?" Cole said quietly. "Recovering? He's fine. Bruised ribs. I don't want to know how he's feeling. I want to know how this happened." Weaver, sensing the direction of the wind before anyone else in the room did, cleared his throat. "Sir, I think it's important to note that Ashford's team responded appropriately given the circumstances." "This was an unprecedented, was it?" Cole said. He did not raise his voice. He simply repeated the word and let it sit there, because he had already pulled up, on the tablet in front of him, the incident log from 3 weeks earlier. The one with 3 entries. The one where a night janitor had reported a prop door on this exact floor 3 separate times, and had each report quietly reclassified as routine maintenance. He had pulled the log himself at 6 that morning, unable to sleep, going through every piece of paper connected to the previous night, the way a man checks every load-bearing wall in a house after he hears it creak. "There's a paper trail here," Cole said, sliding the tablet across the table so Weaver could see it, though Weaver did not need to see it, because Weaver already knew exactly what was on it. 3 reports, same door, same janitor, All three reclassified within 48 hours of filing. Sir, that reclassification would have gone through Ashford's team, not your signatures on the approval, Cole said. Right there, Dale Weaver, Chief Operating Officer. You signed off on reclassifying a security breach as a maintenance ticket. 3 times. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when everyone in it understands that something has just shifted permanently, and nobody yet knows exactly how far the shift is going to travel. I can explain the context, Weaver said. You'll get the chance, Cole said, in front of the board, Thursday. He stood up, tucked the tablet under his arm, and left the conference room without another word, which was, for a man who built his entire career on careful, measured language, its own kind of statement. Cole found Marcus Webb that same afternoon, not in an office, not through a formal summons relayed by an assistant, but in person, on the 9th floor, where Marcus was midway through his supply restocking before his shift technically started, 3 hours early because that was simply the kind of habit the man kept. Marcus straightened up when he saw who was standing at the end of the hallway. He didn't seem nervous. He seemed, if anything, mildly inconvenienced that his restocking had been interrupted. Mr. Webb, Cole said, sir, you have 8 years in the Marine Corps. 4 as a combat instructor. You've been mopping my floors for 9 years, and nobody in this building, including me, ever thought to ask what you did before this. Wasn't relevant to the job description. Wasn't relevant, Cole repeated, and something in his face shifted, the particular expression of a man recalculating a piece of arithmetic he'd assumed was settled. You reported that door 3 times. Yes, sir, and it was reclassified each time. I noticed that too. Did you push back? Formally? Marcus considered the question honestly before he answered it, which was, in itself, characteristic of him. I told your head of security twice, once in the hallway, once by memo through my supervisor. That's the extent of what my position allowed me to do. I'm not security. I'm maintenance. I don't have standing to override anybody's report. You had the training to know it mattered. Training doesn't come with authority attached. Not in this building. Cole absorbed that quietly, the way a man absorbs a fact he doesn't like about his own house. Last night, Cole said, you ended a hostage situation on my private floor in under 2 seconds, unarmed, with a single joint lock, after 3 trained, armed, professionally contracted security specialists had already failed. I didn't think about it as a situation, Marcus said. I heard a fight. I know what a fight sounds like. I went and stopped it. Why didn't you wait for police? Because the man had already gotten past 3 of your guards and was 11 feet from your office door. Waiting wasn't a defensible position. It was, Cole would think later, the most complete answer anyone had given him about anything in years, delivered in 4 flat sentences by a man restocking paper towels. I want you to take over as head of my protective detail, Cole said. Effective immediately. I'll triple your current compensation. You'll have full authority over hiring, training, and building security protocol, starting with that door. Marcus set down the box of paper towels he was holding. I have a daughter, he said, 8 years old. I work nights, so I can walk her to school every morning and be home when she gets off the bus in the afternoon. That's not negotiable. If the job needs someone in a suit sitting in meetings from 8 to 5, it's not a job I can take. Cole studied him for a long moment. You're telling me the condition on a job that triples your salary and puts you in charge of an entire protective division is that you keep working nights. Yes, sir. Most men would take the money and figure out the schedule after. I'm not most men. I'm her father first. Everything else is second. Cole almost smiled, though it didn't quite reach the surface. More a shift in the muscles around his eyes than anything that could be called an expression. Keep your night hours, Cole said. Rebuild the day shift under you if that's what it takes. I don't care how you structure it. I care that the perimeter of this building never has another cardboard wedge in a door again. It won't, Marcus said, and it was not a promise made to impress anyone. It was simply a fact he intended to make true. The board meeting, that Thursday, was attended by 11 directors, Harrison Cole, and, at Cole's specific request, Marcus Webb, seated near the back of the room in a plain collared shirt. the only person in the room not wearing a suit that cost more than a used car. Dale Weaver stood at the front and gave, by every account of everyone present, an impressively confident presentation, full of phrases like unprecedented security event and industry standard response protocols and iterated procedural gap, the kind of language built specifically to survive a room full of people who wanted, more than they wanted the truth, a version of events that didn't implicate them personally for having hired him. The incident has been thoroughly reviewed, Weaver said, and while regrettable, our response team acted within established protocol. We've already begun implementing additional physical security layers to prevent recurrence. It was, on its surface, a plausible-sounding lie, delivered with the smooth practiced confidence of a man who had told variations of it before and watched it work. Harrison Cole let him finish. That was, in its own quiet way, the most damning thing he did all afternoon, letting Weaver run the full length of his own rope before Cole spoke. "Dale," Cole said, when the presentation ended, "how many times was that stairwell door reported as a security violation before Thursday's incident?" Weaver hesitated, the smallest hesitation, the kind that a room full of experienced board members notices, even when they can't yet say why. "I believe there was some earlier maintenance correspondence." "Yes, 3 times, Cole said. "By the same employee, all 3 reclassified as maintenance tickets under your direct approval within 48 hours of each filing." He set copies of the incident log in front of each board member, the same log he'd pulled at 6 in the morning after the incident. The same log with Weaver's signature on the reclassification approval 3 times over. "The employee who filed those reports," Cole continued, "is sitting in the back of this room. He is a former Marine combat instructor who has worked night shift janitorial duty in this building for 9 years, because nobody, including our chief operating officer, ever thought to ask what his background was before dismissing 3 separate written warnings about an unsecured access point." Every head in the room turned. Marcus did not stand. He did not perform anything for the room. He simply sat, hands folded, the same posture he might have held waiting outside a school office. "That same employee," Cole said, "is the reason Alan Voss is currently in police custody rather than standing in my office." He ended the confrontation in under 2 seconds, unarmed, after 3 professionally contracted, fully armed security specialists had already been incapacitated. The room was silent. In the particular way a room goes silent when everyone in it is doing the same math at once and none of them like the answer. "I'd like to know," Cole said, turning back to Weaver, "why 3 written security reports about a known access vulnerability were reclassified as maintenance issues under your signature rather than escalated." Weaver's mouth opened. What came out was not an answer so much as the beginning of several different answers, none of which finished. "I made a judgment call," he finally said, "based on the information available at the time." "The information available," Cole said, "was 3 written reports from a man with more combat training than your entire contracted security team combined, telling you a door on my executive floor didn't lock. Quote, you didn't need judgment. You needed to read the report." Nobody in the room spoke for a long moment. "I'm placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately," Cole said, "pending a full review of every security decision your office has signed off on for the last 3 years. Security will escort you to collect your belongings." Weaver's face went through several expressions in quick succession: disbelief, calculation, something close to anger, before settling into the flat, hollow look of a man realizing that the room he had spent years learning to control no longer recognized his authority. He left without another word, which was, for once, the correct decision he made all day. The board's attention turned, inevitably, to the back of the room. One of the directors, an older woman named Evelyn Marsh, who had sat on Colebrook Dynamics Cord since its founding and who had known Harrison Cole's father before him, spoke up. Mr. Webb," she said, and how long have you worked in this building?" "9 years, ma'am." "And in 9 years, no one asked about your background?" "No, ma'am." "Do you think that says something about how this company treats the people who keep it running?" Marcus considered the question the way he considered most things, slowly, honestly, without performing an answer for effect. I think it says the people signing the checks mostly look up, he said. Not down. Might be worth looking down more often. There's usually more going on there than people expect. Evelyn Marsh nodded slowly, the way a woman nods when she has just heard something she intends to remember. The board voted unanimously to approve Cole's proposed restructuring of the Protective Services Division, with Marcus Webb installed as head of security, reporting directly to Cole, with full independent authority over hiring, protocol, and incident review, insulated specifically from the operations chain that had buried his reports in the first place. It took Marcus 11 days to rebuild the protective detail from the ground up. He kept Reyes and Petrov, both of whom once actually trained properly instead of certified on paper, by a contracting mill more interested in cost than competence, turned out to be capable men who had simply never been taught correctly. He let Ashford go, not out of cruelty, but because a man who slept in a chair outside an unlocked door for 18 months had demonstrated conclusively that competence was not a quality he possessed, regardless of what his file said. He reviewed every door, every badge log, every camera blind spot in the building personally, at night, the same hours he'd always worked, walking the floors with a level of attention that made the building's other night staff joke, not unkindly, that Marcus Webb had simply traded one cart for a clipboard. He kept his mornings. Every single one of them. He walked Ellie to school at 7:45, the same as he always had, and was home again when the bus dropped her off at 3:15. And none of the money, none of the title, none of the board's applause changed that arrangement by a single minute. Desmond Price, who still worked the building's other floors, found Marcus one night in what used to be the break room, now technically outside Marcus's jurisdiction, though Marcus still came to sit there most nights out of habit. "They're saying you turned down a corner office," Desmond said. "Told them I don't need one. I need a desk near the loading dock so I can see who's coming and going. Same reason I always walk past that door." Desmond smiled, the small, satisfied smile of a man who'd spent 11 years believing that quiet competence eventually gets seen, even when it takes far longer than it should. 9 years, Desmond said. 9 years pushing that cart, and one night changes it all. "Wasn't the fight that changed anything?" Marcus said. "Anybody with the training could have stopped that man. It was the door." Somebody finally read the report. 3 months later, Harrison Cole found Marcus on the loading dock a little after midnight, going over a revised badge protocol with the overnight security lit, the same quiet, methodical energy he brought to everything. "You could be running this from the 16th floor, Cole said. "You've earned the office. I see more from down here." Cole nodded, because by that point, he had stopped being surprised by the answer and started expecting it. "Evelyn Marsh asked about you again today," Cole said. "Want you to consult on physical security across all our regional offices, officially this time. With a title people can't ignore." "I'll look at their doors," Marcus said. "That's the part that matters. The title's just paperwork." Cole almost laughed, and this time it did reach the surface. Briefly, an actual, small, quiet laugh. The kind of thing that had become rarer around Colebrook Dynamics than it used to be before the culture started to change. He stayed a while longer than he needed to, going over the badge protocol with more attention than a CEO strictly required, though nobody on the loading dock that night mentioned it, and nobody needed to. Later that week, Ellie asked her father, over cereal, why he still woke up so early, even though his new job paid him so much more money. Marcus thought about it while he poured the milk. "Because you still need someone to walk you to school," he said. "And that job pays better than any of it." Ellie didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet, though she would, someday, understand it completely. For now, she simply nodded, satisfied, and finished her cereal, while her father tied his shoes by the door, the same door he walked through every single morning, rain or shine, promotion or not, because some things, in a life built carefully around what actually mattered, were never meant to change at all.